Pantheism is a descendant of process philosophy. You scratch any theology and you're going to get a philosophy, okay? Scratch any philosophy, you're going to get a theology. The other way around. So pantheism evolves is the application of process philosophy. Process philosophy simply means that there is no static universe. There's no stasis. There's no locked, stopped thing about the universe. Everything is in motion. Everything is in change. Everything is evolving. It's dynamic.
Pretty much every worldview has some sort of belief in that. I mean, I guess
because
there's the yin and yang. There's the yin and yang.
Traditional theology does not have that. Traditional theology denies that. They agree that everything changes in the material world, but they have crafted a non-material realm where things don't change, and that's also considered part of our universe.
Really?
So it's very different. Very different.
That's interesting because don't they acknowledge the new heaven, the new earth, that kind of. Anyway, I don't mean to get into the bushes. We can get into that later. That's interesting. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah.
I love philosophy because it allows you to go, It lets me fit in my my ADHD mind. Getting back to it though, let's talk a little bit more about beyond process theology. What is Chardin? What are the different schools of thought that spawned out of process theology that ended up with pantheism?
Well, the basic tenet of process theology, which is the basic tenet of all pantheistic theology, is the same thing. There is no beginning and there is no end, and it really is the yin yang. And it's very, very popular in the Eastern theology and philosophy.
It is, yes.
Very popular, and Chardin respected that and learned a lot from that. But Chardin's mentor was a guy named Henri Bergson, a French philosopher, Bergson, and he was a towering figure in French philosophy as a process philosopher. He subscribed to the idea that the universe, existence itself, ens qua ens, being as being, ens qua ens in Latin, that this is the only reality, and it's a changeable reality. It is not a static reality. It's a dynamic reality.
So let me ask you a little bit more. You believe in absolutes, moral absolutes,
yes,
reality, beauty. So
yes.
If you believe in these absolutes, but you believe in both an evolving materialistic and spiritual universe, how do you reconcile the two? How do they work together?
Good question. That's a very, very, very good question, and I'll answer it by means of this. Human beings are imperfect observers. Okay, that's my first premise. They're imperfect observers. I don't have all the truth. I don't know everything, and I don't pretend to know everything.
It's a very easy premise to agree with,
especially about me, right?
I mean, I might disagree because I know everything, but I'll let this one slide.
Right. So if you start from the premise that humans are very imperfect observers of reality, truth, goodness, and beauty, the four basic questions that all philosophy seeks to answer, if you accept that first premise, then I've got you. Because the second premise is even more startling, okay? And the second premise is that even though we are not perfect beings, we strive for perfection because we can imagine perfection. We can imagine what perfect equity and perfect equality and perfect mercy and perfect kindness and perfect goodness and perfect reality and perfect beauty. We can imagine what those things are. Now, our thoughts about that change. They evolve, okay? But the idea of those things themselves, they attract our mind. As a man is attracted to a woman or another man, as the case may be, there's an attractiveness to the idea of perfected realities.
Right, because guys don't fantasize about the perfect girl. Right. No. Yeah.
Or
exactly.
Guy.
I see exactly what that's a very good analogy. So does this maybe not the idea change, but does this sort of metaphysical carrot we'll use, if we're the donkey and it's sort of like a carrot right out of our reach, but we're going towards it.
Yeah.
Does that carrot change over time, or is it just absolute?
The carrot changes, but our perception of the carrot does change, and that's because we are victims of change. We are in a world. We are not in a world of stasis, of static reality. Let me give you another example. Black hole theory, which, by the way, the word black hole was invented by a Catholic priest, by the way, which is really interesting, not by some atheistic materialist scientist. Anyway, the whole black hole discussion begins with what went, how do we perceive black hole, and how do we perceive the whole notion of Big Bang? What is a Big Bang? The materialists want to say, well, everything evolved from a Big Bang. Everything
Ex nihilo,
right,
out of nothing.
Right. And so you have philosophers like a mutual friend of ours who actually debated me and lost the debate because he tried to argue that something can come from nothing. Something can come from nothing. Now, this is a contradiction of logic.
And a contradiction of what a 2-year-old knows.
A 2-year-old, a 2-year-old knows that the Christmas present under the tree didn't just happen.
It doesn't matter if it's from Santa Claus, it came from somewhere.
That train or that doll came from somebody, right? So even contemporary quantum physics is up against the hard question in physics, which leads to the hard question in metaphysics, which is what went bang. Now it could be, and this is where physics is evolving. Physics is evolving to a pantheistic process, Henri Bergsonian, Teilhard de Chardin view of metaphysics and physics, namely that everything that is, including God, everything that is in process.
So how are we able to determine that it's really not just our perceptions or understanding, but how are we able to prove that it is indeed God that is changing, not just our understanding? How are we able to determine that?
Well, because there are universal recognitions. For instance, let me just comment about how beauty informs morality. I'll repeat that: how beauty informs morality. If something is immoral, it is ugly.
Mm-hmm.
Now that should tell you right then and there that there's a metaphysics going on, because there's no material explanation for what I just said. Nothing. There's no scientist, no physicist. Nobody in the physical universe can tell us that when I see a baby bayoneted on a battlefield, or when I see a woman viciously raped, or a homosexual thrown off of a rooftop, it makes me sick. It physically makes me, it's an ugly thing to see it.
It's a bad thing to look at. It's like something you don't want to see.
It's cringeworthy. You physically cringe from. It's like smelling a fart. Okay, you cringe from farts.
Yeah, you would have a lot of experience in that.
Exactly. I'm very gaseous, but there is a relationship between the physical and the metaphysical, and that's it. That is it. There's a universal recognition that certain things are ugly. They're immoral because they're ugly. They repulse us.
I don't know. Were you about to answer my question? I don't really understand how that answers my question, though. My question is, how do we know that it is not just our understanding and our perceptions that are evolving, but it's indeed God that's evolving? How are we able to separate the two?
Well, this goes back to accepting the first premise that I put forward,
that we're imperfect beings,
and that not only that we are imperfect observers. So we don't. So what we call God is really existence. That's where pantheism comes in.